Hello, and welcome to the True Sky Crew podcast, where we share our cosmic pearls of wisdom. Why True Sky Astrology? Because when we align with the true sky, we align with ourselves. Today, we're going to discuss our origin story, our logo, and why True Sky Astrology. We are your hosts, Georgia, Janine, and Sachi. Welcome.
Welcome, everybody. So I am Sachi. A little bit about me. I run Sachi the Scorpio on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. So I do a bunch of different astrology. So I do real sky astrology chart hacking. I also do some card readings. I do tarot and Pokemon card readings, something that I also run through Sachi the Spiritual Gym Leader page. And I also do spiritual guidance and spiritual mentorship. So a little bit about my astrological background. So astrology found me at a pretty early age, but my astrological analysis started when I was age 9. So I used to cut out the horoscopes from the newspaper that used to be by the comics, and I would paste them in a notebook. And at recess, either the day of or the next day, I would interview people at recess about the day that they were having or that they had yesterday, and I would compare the data from the horoscope to what they were going through. And I started noticing trends, so that kind of got me hooked. That continued until I was in about 8th grade. That's when they banned horoscopes from the Catholic school I went to. But it's interesting because I was always very data driven when it comes to astrology, which makes sense. I have a molecular biology, neuroscience, and material science background. And that study continued from sort of a scientific perspective of astrology. When I was in college, I was introduced to a whole chart. So it was quite a while before I knew, there's more than just the sun sign. So when I was in college, I started to study those charts and study the science, the real science of astrology. And then I started my astrological content back in 2016, 2017, and then opened my astrological business in 2019, 2020. And I did start with the tropical algorithm, like most people do. They are innocently indoctrinated into it. Sort of without their consent or their knowledge. And I had my true sky awakening in 2021. And it was actually on the 8/8 portal, which most people think is Lionsgate. And that is something that the True Sky Crew is going to talk about in the future, that there really is no lion. Well, someone's lion, but it's not the sky. And so on the 8/8 portal, me and my partner were actually running a workshop called the Unicorn Workshop. It's a timeline jumping workshop. And we were focused on manifesting your highest vibrational timeline in alignment with your soul mission. And the very next day, the true sky revealed itself to us. So it was a very, very powerful, pivotal moment. It's also very humbling to, be indoctrinated into the tropical algorithm and then have this awakening and immediately have to share with your clients, followers, people who have trusted your guidance, be like, hey, wait a minute, something's not right. Everybody look at the sky. And so that is how my transition happened. And, once you go true sky, you never go back.
Amen, sister.
That's the truth.
So true. Thanks for sharing all that.
Mm-hmm.
I found it a little bit later in life, True Sky Astrology, but yeah, I found it probably after 2017, or astrology in general, not just True Sky, but it was definitely awakening. I started really watching moon cycles. So that kind of ties in interestingly with our logo. And I just started noticing like the moon was about a sign off for every full moon and every new moon. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And started Google searching stuff. And that's when I found True Sky Astrologies, and that was such a game changer. And I just started studying, and I was like hoovering up all the information I could find on True Sky Astrology, along with like going through a whole awakening process that started in about 2017. So it was a lot of info taking in a lot of info through that period. And True Sky Astrology just happened to be one of them. So it was an intense learning curve. But once I started reading my chart with True Sky, it was just like, I went from being a tropical Scorpio to being a True Sky Libra. And I was like, oh my God, my life makes sense. Like, because I never really resonated with being a Scorpio. I was like, I just don't understand all this angst. I'm more like, I don't know, more like Cher from that movie. What's that movie with her in it? I can't think of the name of it, but just the popularity contest girl. And I was like, that's so me. And that's how I found it. So it made a lot of sense. And I just was going through a huge process of like inner soul alchemy, developed all my skill sets for like the dream work and the somato emotional healing, which was so integral in my process. And the astrology really was too. It just helped me, like, all my life. All I ever wanted to know is like, who the F am I? Right? Like, who am I? And astrology really helped me figure out what was the meat and potatoes of that. And then I found fixed star astrology, and game changer there too. So if you're into any kind of fixed star astrology, like, you'll just look at the tropical algorithm, like, how does it even make sense? Because, you know, they'll tell you like the Pleiades are in Gemini, and it's like, that's nonsense. It makes zero sense. So that's kind of how I found it. And it was just very integral in my awakening journey. It's been a fun ride. It's been intense, but it's been a fun ride. So yeah. How about you, Georgia?
Thank you, Janine. So like Sachi, I found astrology at a very young age. I was 9 years old. My teacher brought in a tropical astrology chart into class. And so the first thing I saw was, my birthday is June 21st. Am I a Gemini or am I a Cancer? I started to watch the kids and started to notice, like, all the kids who are born in April have a similar body type. All the kids who are born in May act like this. And so for me, I was hooked right away. I've studied a lot of various modalities of healing and health and spirituality throughout my life. And so astrology is a place where I really get to integrate and kind of collage it together. It was in 2005 that I first saw my sidereal chart, and I wasn't having it. I went from a Leo rising to a Cancer rising, and I was like, nope, I'm not going from a movie star to a housewife. But no, thank you. So it took me a little while to fully accept it. But by 2019, it really did take me a while. I couldn't not see the truth anymore. And so I made the switch. I had been writing about astrology for a couple of years by then. And I worked with a Vedic astrology teacher for a while, and I learned all about the nakshatras. And then I realized that Vedic astrology wasn't really for me, and I started becoming cognizant to the true sky. But it still took me a little bit to make the full switch. And then last summer, I had a reading with Janine, and it was my first True Sky reading, and I never went back. I've been completely hooked, reading everything I can about fixed stars and the galactic history, and really finding that when we align with the true sky, it is the most beautiful and amazing alignment with ourselves. And I feel like I've grown as a person more in this last year than I have in the 20 years of being a spiritual seeker prior. So that's my intro for today.
Yes, that is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, guys. I think that's important for people to hear, like, how we all woke up to the true sky. I mean, it's right above your head every night, but like, how many of us look at it regularly, right? We're buried in our tech. So I think that's valuable information. And especially for some of us, it's such a long transition, like really in the tropical algorithm, because it's so saturated in the collective, and how it can take something really like profound to just be like, oh my gosh, yeah, it just doesn't line up. Who thought that was a good idea?
Mm-hmm.
That was a part of what kind of I was dragging my feet about, because I realized there's so few of us who are looking at the true sky, that I felt like I was going to start speaking into the void. So I did kind of drag my feet, partly because I didn't want to disconnect with the audience that I had. But then the truth just is the truth. And once you know the truth, there's nothing else.
Exactly.
Yeah. That can be one of the pitfalls. Actually, some of the people I've talked to that are astrologers, that they're like, I'm afraid to lose my client base. And
Yeah.
it's like, do what you got to do, but the sky is the sky.
It
It's
doesn't
not
sound
gonna-
very aligned for
No.
sort of spiritual worker.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I first had my real sky awakening, I was, in working with a lot of big astrology accounts at the time, and most of them, after a couple days, blocked me, told their clientele to block me, to stay away. What I'm saying is not true. And it's like, you know what? People are going to see for themselves. It's the sky. All you have to do is look up. Like, it's really simple.
Yeah. And that can take us a little bit into maybe like the origins of the systems, because I really feel like the origins of astrology was astronomy, and it's like navigating and sailing. That's the research I've come to resonate with, is like they used to be very adept sky watchers because they literally sail from continent to continent by navigating via the stars. And then in certain geographic locations, I feel like where agriculture was a real issue, like they needed to track the seasons. I feel like that's where it kind of developed into this 12 sign system that was tracking what the sun was doing, which that's what tropical measures, is like the repeating cycle of what the sun does annually. So I feel like it diverged at some point, and agricultural systems sort of more embrace the tropical system. But, when that was started 2000 years ago, is like precession and the true sky lined up, because that's the origin point, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then as precession slowly, that 26,000 year cycle that the earth wobbles on around our pole star, a couple thousand years into that cycle, and you're going to start seeing a difference. And that's where we're at now. The sky is 24 degrees different than what tropical astrology relates. So it's hard to miss it at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And we will have some infographics on all of this information for you guys shortly. So I'm thinking maybe a good place to start, I'm just going to show a screenshot of the night sky right now, well, an hour from now. But as we can see, right, even into the future, the sun is still very clearly in the star system of Gemini, whereas the tropical algorithm, or, quote unquote, mainstream astrology, they're saying that, we're not too far off from Leo season. Leo's over here, the sun's over here. It still has not transited through Cancer. So just a visual representation, people are saying it's Cancer season, but really the sun is in Gemini. So when people are saying the sun is in Cancer, that's not necessarily the case. And I would even say that's the definition of false light, is by saying that our light source is literally somewhere that it's not.
Yeah.
I agree with that completely. It's definitely the definition of false light. And it's meant to be so. It's meant to lead people off the path, because if we're always just a little off, then we're always just a little off.
Exactly. And that's another thing. Oh, go ahead.
So it's just a wake up call. Like, at this point, it is kind of like a diversion tactic because it's so mainstream, but I don't think it was initially designed to be that. It was just a way to track the sun.
It was not. Which we'll talk about that history as well. However, using that timeline, which is basically what it is, the tropical algorithm is a timeline, siphon even. But when you tune into the true sky, you literally are accessing a different timeline. And it's, as we put it, if you align with the true sky, you align with your true self. So it's the timeline that is associated with your truest self, because it holds your truest celestial code of when you were born.
Yeah, the true now moment, whereas the tropical algorithm at this point is a 2,000-year-old timeline, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I should screen share. Let me screen share the comparison so people can get an idea. This is the Moon app. It's called Moon is the app. And you can see this one's tropical, this one's sidereal, and this one's astronomical or true sky. And you can see the difference. The yellow one is the sun, this one is the moon. You can see how they overlay the systems, which is super handy for comparing
Mhm.
what the difference is between them. So sidereal and tropical use a 30-degree sign system. You can see they're even, and then the true sky uses the actual side, the arc degrees of the constellations. So that's the only downfall I see with sidereal is it's still using a 30-degree sign system. So it's kind of like a hybrid between the true sky and tropical, but it does track precession.
Mhm.
But you can see the difference. Like, yeah, it says right now it's tropical, the sun is in Cancer, but in sidereal it's in Gemini, and in true sky it's in Gemini. So I just thought that was a super interesting graphic for people to see. And this is current. This is like midnight. Well, it's like in 10 minutes, but for the right now moment. So yeah, and this one also tracks the moon. So,
You know, I think also though with the tropical algorithm, there were a lot of shenanigans happening in Egypt at the time that really got cemented into place. So I'm not 100% sure that it wasn't with a purpose.
you know,
Like, I
everything
think-
gets hijacked. Everything with good
Yeah.
intentions has like a hijack point, and I feel like that's probably what happened.
Well, it's interesting because the Exodus was like a couple hundred years before, if I'm not mistaken, around like 400 BC, where the tropical algorithm was created like around 150. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely unrest, and especially as time continues on, it's sort of the agenda gets a bit nefarious, I would say. Not that the math was necessarily intended to be used for misleading people, but that is exactly what it turned into, and sort of where it is now.
Yeah, and it's certainly being pushed now. I mean, at some point, some time back, we started to realize things were off, but it never got corrected.
Exactly.
So that's where
and
you start to see.
Yeah.
A timeline manipulation.
Yes.
So I'm thinking about pulling up the chart of the different types of astrology.
Yeah, go for it.
All right.
Can you see the chat, the live chat, Sashi? Like if there's any questions that people toss in the chat? 'Cause I can't see it on my end. People may be having questions and I can't even
Yeah, let me
go to YouTube and see.
pull it up. So show more. You know, I do not see a live chat. It does show the viewers, but interestingly enough, before when I streamed it, there was a live chat. But I am not seeing a live chat. So I guess
It might be something you have to enable.
possibly if anybody sees a live chat, if you could say something, or DM me somehow on Instagram and let me know if there's a live chat or not. I'll just keep my Instagram open to see. Okay, so we can just talk about this while waiting for a little bit of feedback to see, because yeah, I don't see any live chat option. But if it is not there, oh, okay, I just got confirmation the live chat is there.
Yay! Yeah,
so-
if anybody has questions, feel free to pop it in.
Yes, definitely. And actually what I can do is hop on to our thing on my phone.
Oh yeah, there it is. I see it. Hi, Rachel.
Okay, awesome.
Golden Warrior Mama, hello.
Thanks for joining, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yep, I see it.
Marjorie, hi. Thank you for popping in, Marjorie. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, everybody. So for the types of astrology, so just a little direct comparison, there's basically like 3 different types. We have the true sky, which is what we're here to talk about. And then we also have sidereal, and then we have tropical. So for true sky, as we've mentioned, we use the real sky, and we also use the real constellation sizes. So as Janine had mentioned before, sidereal uses 30 degrees for each zodiac sign. However, that's not really the case. If you look at the sky, Virgo on the ecliptic is like 49 degrees. It's huge. And Scorpio, the sun only transits through Scorpio for about 7 days. So it's like 7 to 8 degrees on the ecliptic, depending on how you calculate the void space in between constellations. So we use the real constellation sizes. We also recognize planetary transits that are outside of the zodiac. So a zodiac sign by definition is a constellation that is on the ecliptic. So that means the sun moves through that constellation. So that's just sun movement. However, we have some planets that move into different constellations. So for example, I have seen Venus in Scutum, which is like a shield that is right above Sagittarius. So if I see Venus in Scutum, I'm not going to say Venus is in Sagittarius. I'm going to say it's in Scutum because that's exactly where it is. The moon is consistently in the constellation Cetus. So there's no reason to call it an Aries moon or a Pisces moon if it's literally in Cetus. So you will see us talk about some of the constellations that are outside of the zodiac. And then we also recognize star alignments outside of the zodiacal ecliptic. So not only do we do readings of planets or celestial bodies that are moving through different constellations other than the zodiac, we also look at alignments. So if this star is in alignment with Venus, maybe it's not, Venus isn't, touching it or moving through that constellation. But if you basically draw a perpendicular to either the ecliptic or horizon, that would be considered an alignment as well, which it's from the horizon, correct?
An alignment is from the ecliptic.
Oh, the ecliptic. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we also take into consideration the precession of the equinoxes. So that is that 26,000 year cycle that Janine was talking about, that changes. And for, I guess, practical matters, that cycle is about a 1 degree shift every 72 years. So in our lifetime, I mean, who knows with technology, maybe we'll see quite a few of those degrees. But usually most people only see a 1 degree shift in their lifetime. So it's really not that big of a deal. But on a personal level, a true year versus a tropical year, the tropical year is 20 minutes less. That's how that 1 degree per 72 years equates to in time. So as we mentioned before, how the tropical algorithm is a bit of a timeline siphon, that's why literally our years are shorter than they actually should be. And then we have sidereal, which is the in-between between tropical and true sky. So there is a version of sidereal called true sidereal. This is the closest sidereal to the true sky. It uses the real sky in its calculations, and it uses 13 signs. So, spoiler alert, Ophiuchus is a real, because the sun moves through that constellation. So by definition, it is a zodiac sign. If anyone wants to argue against it, again, just look at the sun's there. So sidereal uses the 13 signs, Ophiuchus, but they do not.
Ooh, we got a little bit of lag there.
We can't hear you, Sachi.
Yeah, hang on, give her a signal a minute to come back.
Example, the last star of Cancer and the first star of Leo, they basically just split it in half, and say, this is where the constellation boundaries between Cancer and Leo are. Whereas True Sky, we take into consideration the void spaces in between. We don't really call it one or the other. Some may call it sort of a cuspy energy, I guess, but if a planet is not in any constellation, why would you really call it one or the other? And that is where like alignments come into to be like a lot of help. And then True Sidereal also takes into consideration the precession of the equinoxes. So does Vedic sidereal, and so does Western sidereal. Really, tropical is the only one that doesn't take into consideration that very important aspect of our being in relationship with the celestial bodies. So for Vedic, this is what is called the Eastern perspective sometimes, and usually online when, you know, the True Sky is mentioned with some of these big astrology accounts, they sort of default into this sort of just regurgitation of, oh, that's just the Eastern perspective, or that's just Vedic. No, completely different. Sidereal does not mean Vedic. Sidereal does not mean Eastern. Sidereal does not mean True Sky. So Vedic is the Eastern perspective, very similar to Western. As Janine had mentioned, they use 30-degree segmentation for 12 signs. So they ignore Ophiuchus. They just use the 12 basic ones that you would have in tropical. And they pretend like each of the constellations is 30 degrees. They also use Eastern nomenclature and mythology. So with Western, so Vedic and Western sidereal are very similar. They both use the 30 degrees for the 12 signs, except where Eastern will talk about, you know, Indian gods and goddesses. Western would use Western nomenclature like Greek and Roman mythology. Vedic uses nakshatras, which are lunar mansions. Georgia, do you want to talk a little bit about the lunar mansions? I feel like I'm just sort of talking a little bit too much if you want to touch upon the subject.
Well, I think we can equally speak of it, but the nakshatras are the area of the constellation that the moon passes through. And so that's why it's called a lunar mansion. But really the energy of each nakshatra has to do with fixed star alignments. So we could say, you know, Kritika is actually talking about the Pleiades, or Rohini is actually talking about Aldebaran. So there's a real kind of, like, if you understand the nakshatras, you actually understand more about fixed stars than you realize you do. But in Vedic astrology, I would even say that they use nakshatras more than signs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And let's break it down, because like you guys are the more proficient in Vedic, and I'm resonating with the audience at like, it's a a nakshatra is like a lunar day, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the period of time it takes the moon. That's why there's 28 nakshatras, because it takes the moon 28 solar days to make a full cycle. So a nakshatra is a lunar day. Mm-hmm. That's important to know.
Yes. And it's interesting because there used to be 28 lunar mansions. Now there are only 27 that are used, kind of similar to how we'll talk about it. There were originally 18 signs, but 13 signs was pretty solid. And then they got rid of Ophiuchus, which of course is the healer and the medicine person, the alchemist, and so on. But yeah, they did get rid of a lunar mansion. So it's between 27 and 28, but yeah, it really should be 28. And that's probably something that we need to talk about in another episode, because again, it should reflect the reality of our solar system. And just as Georgia has said, that Vedic is more based on the lunar mansions. So it's very nakshatra based. And here we see that Vedic charts are square. So every other chart, for the most part, that you're going to see is going to be circle. Vedic usually are square charts, and it's broken into 12 squares, and it will say your nakshatra on the squares more prominently than it will say signs. So that definitely is true. And that's because it's more of a lunar analysis than a solar analysis.
And, you know, because of that lunar analysis, I do find that using that system to kind of peek into algorithms of the matrix can be actually quite helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Although, I mean, as I've gone along, I peek in there less, but if that's something you're interested in, it does give you some insight.
Absolutely. Especially when it comes to, you know, we honor the void space between the constellations. And a question I've got consistently is, well, if a planet's in the middle of two constellations, then, you know, how do you know which it is? Well, one, you could use the midpoint method. You could read it as sort of a blend of both, but also this is really where the lunar mansions come in handy for me, because you can literally pinpoint which lunar mansion it is, because the way that the moon moves, again, the lunar day is going to be a very specific space amount in the sky. It's quantifiable. So you can pinpoint someone's placement. So if it's in between something like Cancer and Leo, you can very easily you know, see what lunar mansion it is.
I agree with that too as well. And, you know, like, for instance, if it's Mrigashira Nakshatra, you actually know that that's an Orion alignment. So
Yeah.
it does start to overlap and line up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that also, yeah, it comes in a lot of handy with things that are outside of the zodiacal elliptic. Absolutely. One of the other things, which I just want to touch upon real quick about Vedic, is that they use the different ayamashas.
Okay, you're gonna
And
have to explain what an Ayan Masha is.
yes, let me pull up. So as we mentioned here, up here, right, using 30-degree segmentation for 12 signs. So that's where different Vedic perspectives sort of take different approaches. So there are, you know, hundreds, maybe even thousands of different ayamashas. And you could even create your own if you wanted to. So so this is basically how it works. You pick a star. So let's say, can I just draw? Yeah. So let's say that I'm going to pick this star. Okay, I need to pick a different color. Let's do bright purple. Okay, there we go. So let's say I pick this star. Okay. So if I say that this is 0 degrees Sagittarius, so that means from here to here is now Sagittarius. So I'm going to go 30 degrees from it. This would be 30 degrees. Okay, that means right here is 0 degrees Capricorn. And then from that star, you do 30 degrees. Okay, well now here's 0 degrees Aquarius, where if you look at the sky, it looks preposterous, right? I mean, we already see that Aquarius is over here. And obviously these aren't drawn to scale either. But so that is basically how these calculations are made. You pick a star and then you do X amount of degrees from it. There are some that choose 0 degrees Sagittarius as their main star. I believe that's the most common one, Fagin, I think, Fagin Bradley. And then there are some that choose, you know, stars anywhere in any constellation. There's one that when I was getting into Vedic that I really liked, they chose a star that was 14 degrees Cancer because they think that like astrology should be heart-centered. And then they just did, you know, the degrees from that and then created their wheel. So basically different ayamashas are based on which star you pick. So for example, someone might say this is the 1st degree of Sagittarius. Okay, well that means now the 30 degrees ends here. So the 1st degree of Capricorn is actually right here. And then 30 degrees from that would be Aquarius. So it really just depends on your reference point. They're all pretty similar. You usually see a variation, you know, probably no more than 10 degrees, at least that I've seen. But that is how there are different Vedic perspectives. But again, they are pretty similar.
So we have a question in the chat. Marjorie asks, Are the nakshatras 360 different names, or are there repeats of the 30?
360 different names. So I'm not quite sure. So there's different lunar mansions.
Say that one more time.
Wait, are you talking about the nakshatras, which are the lunar days, or the ayan mashas, which is what I just
Nakshatras.
the nakshatra? So there's 27 or 28 different nakshatras.
Right.
Mhm.
Because
And they repeat.
I think a visual
they
would help.
repeat.
They repeat. It makes a wheel, right? Or whatever system you're using, a square or a wheel.
Mhm.
But how many degrees are in a nakshatra? Like if you were looking at the sky, how many arc degrees? It would be 360 divided by 28, technically, right?
Yes. So well, because it technically uses 27, each one would be like 13.33 degrees.
Okay.
Almost
But
13.
if you do the correct
Which that's what I was going for.
12.8, yeah.
Go for the 28.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, okay, that makes sense. I knew there was a number in there and it's 13. I was like, there's a nugget in there with the numerology. The divine feminine number.
Exactly.
So that would, you would divide 360 degrees by 28, basically.
Yeah.
And that's how many there are. They don't repeat. Or are there repeats of the 30? No, there's no 30 degree. It's not a 30 degree system with nakshatras. No, it's based on a lunar count. Yeah.
So it's about 12 to 13 degrees per lunar mansion. And again, similar to ayan mashas, it's sort of up to the astrologer or astrologist of where they put 0 degree Aries. So where the first lunar mansion starts can vary. If you go by a fixed star, it's very straightforward. But if you do it based on IAU boundaries, which are like the constellation boundaries, or if you do it from midpoint method, it will give you a bit of a different calculation. Good question.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Yep. And then once it goes into the last lunar mansion, so the 27th or 28th, whatever system you use, it goes right back into one. So it is a repeating cycle in that way.
Yeah, it's similar. It's just we're so used to thinking about tracking the sun and the solar calendars, and nakshatras are just lunar based. That's the only difference. It's just a different rhythm, basically.
And it helps you break up the sky into smaller pieces, kind of similar to what tropical would use as a deacon in a way.
Do you have one of your charts handy, Sashi, that you can show a chart cut up with nakshatras or divided into nakshatras? Because I feel like the visual is probably really helpful. It's so simple, but it would be really helpful.
Yeah, let me pull one up here and then, okay. Let's see.
So essentially also the nakshatras will explain to you why a Gemini who has alignments with Betelgeuse is different than a Gemini who has alignments with Sirius, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if it's me, like I dipped a toe into Vedic stuff. Like I followed a Vedic guy. That's how I learned about a lot of astrology on YouTube, was this Vedic guy. But I started reading one of his books. I'm like, this is just too complicated. Like, it's not that hard. So I put that Vedic astrology down, and I just started looking at the real sky, and it just makes life easier because you can literally just look at the alignments with Sirius and alignments with Betelgeuse and just be like, obviously there's a difference. Right.
All right. I do have so this is an example of the type of chart that I use. I use a 13 house system, so it may look a little bit different than what one is used to. But so basically right here, 0 degree Aries, this is where the first lunar mansion would be. So I superimpose it based on the first degree of Aries and do the 27 lunar mansions that way. So in a placement, for example, this would be Moon, Virgo, first house, 13th lunar mansion.
Yeah, I feel like that outer wheel helps it make a lot more sense. Like you can literally see how small the sections are versus the actual constellations in the wheel. Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the so then we have Western sidereal, which is basically, it's pretty much the same as tropical, but it's in real time. And it's pretty much the same as Vedic, except it uses Western nomenclature and the mythology and is a circle chart. These are almost synonymous, and these are almost synonymous, except tropical is really, really off. So the true sky we use in real time. Obviously, right, we're looking at the sky or using a sky app. Sidereal is also in real time, and tropical is not in real time. So the tropical algorithm is a solar system that is on a loop around the time of 0, even though 0 is not a real time, right? It's a point, it's a reference point that was created to create the BC and AD system, which is a Catholic Church system. So, we adhere to that system whether we like it or not. So just even by saying that we are in the year 2023, you are saying that we are in the year of our Lord, 2023. So it's Anno Domini, which is like in the year of our Lord, and then BC is before Christ. So the tropical algorithm's time loop is based upon the birth of Christ, birth of Yeshua. So interesting little energy siphon that the tropical algorithm, well, let's put it this way. The Catholic Church hijacked the tropical algorithm in this way to siphon that energy. The tropical algorithm was not made for the Catholic Church, if that makes sense, which we'll talk a little bit about the timelines later. But anyway, so tropical is the mainstream astrology. So as we mentioned before, people are going to say, oh, it's Cancer season. Oh, we're moving into Leo season. When the sun is clearly in Gemini, that would be the mainstream. So the tropical does not use the precession of the equinoxes. And again, that is that 26,000 year cycle that Janine was talking about. That's that 1 degree shift every 72 years. And that's what equates to each year being 20 minutes less than the real year of what the sun is going through. So if we look from the sun, doing its full thing from real Aries to real Pisces, the tropical algorithm is a 20-minute difference. Tropical also uses a 30-degree segmentation for the 12 signs. If you know anything about astrology, there's no surprise there. And again, it's very similar to Vedic and Western, except tropical is just off. So, when the moon is in Leo, tropical is going to say that the moon is in Virgo, or even Libra sometimes. And then, so tropical also uses the Western nomenclature mythology. And as Janine also mentioned, the tropical algorithm is currently around 24 degrees inaccurate. And this time gap is going to grow as time continues. So right now, 24 degrees incorrect. Soon it'll be 25.
Yeah, that's a really interesting subject to me, because I wish I had a visual that I could show y'all for this, but it's super interesting to think when you think about precession. Number one, you're measuring what's happening on the horizon at the spring equinox, like what sign is rising. Right now it's Pisces, I think. I'm pretty sure.
Yes,
yes, it is.
It is. We're still in the age of Pisces. Yeah,
we're still in the age of Pisces. That's right. We've got about
Aquarius
715 more years before we actually hit the true age of Aquarius. So that's how we're measuring precession. But the interesting thing is to think halfway through this precessional cycle, it's going to be like Libras over there. We're going to be like completely opposite Aries as we're halfway through a 26,000 year cycle. I'm sure by then people will realize the discrepancy, but still it's kind of just mind boggling to think if it just continued on, how obvious it would be that it keeps separating and separating and separating. And then another, 12,000, 13,000 years comes around. And the interesting thing is the two cycles, tropical and true sky, would sync up again after 26,000 years. And then they start to diverge again. And then they come back and sync up again. So I just think that's an interesting mental process to think about that and go, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like a timeline convergence and separation.
Yes.
So kind of even almost like a double helix sort of intertwining even.
Yeah, that's super
or
interesting.
cell division from the separation around, at the 1 BC, 1 AD point.
And I personally don't want to 100% invalidate tropical astrology, but you just have to understand what it's really measuring. All it's measuring is equinoxes and solstices. It's measuring the ever repeating, never changing up and down sine wave of equinoxes and solstices. That's it. It only measures the sun. So there is a little bit of information you can glean from a tropical chart, but you're only looking at the sun sign. Everything else correlates to absolutely nothing. Yeah. Unless you're in one of those years where both systems converge. That's it.
I agree with
that. Which is thousands of years from now.
The amount of light that we receive.
And it would also be a period, sorry, Georgia, it would be a period of probably 1,000 years where they were converged. It wouldn't just be a day.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it would work for about a couple, like 150 years is what
on either side. Yeah, on either side of the convergence. Yeah. Go ahead.
But it does feel interesting, like when that, like I feel like the true sky is on more of the ascending timeline and that tropical is more on the descending timeline. So there is something kind of interesting to chew on for me about when those timelines do converge. It feels to me like there's a sense of lightness and almost like a renaissance that feels like that will occur when that happens.
Yeah, I kind of wonder about that too, though, because it's just when tropical, like that 0 AD, that no man's zone is kind of a made up point in space time. It's the time they designated, hey, we're doing this. It's kind of arbitrary. So it's just where it was at. It was where it was at in the cycle. That's true. Yeah.
And it basically nailed down 0 degrees Aries to the equinox. So there is something with that, with the light.
Yes. Which, it's interesting because the information that you can get from the tropical algorithm is about the sun with the equinoxes and solstices. And that's an argument that a lot of tropical astrologers use is, well, we're measuring the seasons. But again, that is also very a flimsy argument, I'll say, because one, there's a whole southern hemisphere that is experiencing the exact opposite. So even though the tropical algorithm says, 0 degrees Aries is when the spring equinox happens, number one, the sun's in Pisces, so wake up. And two, in the southern hemisphere, it's not spring, so it doesn't actually align with the seasons at all for half of our planet. In the northern hemisphere, okay, but how many people live in a place where there are all 4 seasons? Personally, I live in the deciduous forest, which means that there is 4 seasons. And I've noticed since I've started using the True Sky, the weather shifts are a lot less alarming for me because it's, everyone's saying, oh, it's spring, it's spring, it's spring, which yes, we hit that equinox point, but it's still Pisces season. So here it's still snowing, it's still cold, and I'm not alarmed that, my seeds haven't germinated yet. Virgo season is basically 50 degrees, which is basically 50 days. And Virgo season goes well into October. And as someone who works with four seasons, who grows things, who is, connected to nature consistently, it makes sense. Harvest season is all the way through Virgo season. If you think the peak of harvest season is in August, the beginning of September, like, you clearly know nothing about the seasons or working with them. So, a lot of the arguments you can just sort of poke holes through, and it just really doesn't apply, even though there is some information that you can get from the tropical algorithm when it comes to, the sun's position or movements.
And literally, what if you live on the equator, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no man's land.
Yeah, then you're
doesn't apply. Tropical doesn't apply at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Either side.
Exactly.
And then you wouldn't necessarily even equate a sign with a season in that case
Right?
anyway. It
just
all has to do with the bend
summer.
of the light.
Yeah.
It's just summer all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does have a lot of holes. It's interesting once you start making a bullet point list, how it's like, well, bring your best argument because we can poke a hole in it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's basically what we've been doing over the years.
Yes.
And it's good to bring this, discussion to the general public, and let them
Agreed.
think for it themselves. We really encourage people to not just listen to what we're saying, do your own research, look at the sky yourself, up at the sky, look at sky apps as well. Read into different types of astrology and just make an informed decision for yourself. As I mentioned in the beginning, we're all sort of innocently indoctrinated into tropical astrology. If you Google anything about astrology, chances are 99% of the time you're going to get some tropical information. Every astrology website, every astrology app is going to say the same thing. And we know this because we've tried to look for, real sky stuff. So, it's very interesting how the astrology community is sort of an echo chamber of a fake solar system. I'll call it. It's a pretend solar system.
It's a simplified system. I kind of feel like too, I'm always one that gives the thing the benefit of the doubt, right? I'm like, think about in 0 AD to when up till the technological age, basically. So like maybe 2000 years, how laborious it was to calculate charts, and how it would have been beneficial to simplify the system and be like, this is close enough. I kind of feel like that is also a little bit of maybe what had happened, but
it could. This might be a good time to bring this up, or we can talk a little bit about that. But yeah, I mean, obviously the tropical algorithm is a very neat algorithm. That's exactly what it is. It's an algorithm. It's a mathematical algorithm that does not reflect the reality of the solar system. So it's nice that it repeats. But if you have a repeating lie for time until it becomes a truth again, is it really something that you want to adhere to? I guess would be the question.
Yeah, and that's my thing with the sine wave, like tropical measures, the ever repeating sine wave. There's no evolution. That's the thing with the tropical system. There's no evolution. It just repeats ad infinitum.
Exactly.
It's crystallized instead of the spiral of time.
Not crystallized, not in a healthy way either.
Right. Yeah. It's like corroded.
Petrified.
Yeah. Petrified. I like that.
Yeah. I do too.
Yeah. And as Georgia had said, it's tuning into the true sky is an ascended timeline, because like you are connected with your true sky self. And you're also evolving along with the cosmos. Especially if you're doing something like a I want to say a precession chart, because we're talking about the precession of the equinox.
A progress chart.
Yeah, a progress chart.
Yeah.
It's really going to just give a different, completely different energy than a tropical.
And there's so much more just complexity to a reading, like. Whereas in tropical, like Aries is always opposite Scorpio. It's like there some of these bigger signs, like Virgo, will be opposite different signs, and it just leaves room for more complexity and more the personality matrix, you can see the person's personality and how, it's kind of surprising maybe to them to be like, oh, this has always been opposite this, and now it's not. And like, okay, I can see how that works differently in my personality matrix. So I think it's this beautiful natural complexity that gets to shine through when you start looking at the signs that are not an even 30-degree system.
Yeah, I've calculated that there are 13 axes in True Sky, if we include Cetus, which I think is necessary. Which,
spoiler alert.
Which, people who have placements in the axis of Virgo and Aries are completely different than with Aries and Libra. Like Aries and Virgo is a lot more aggressive. It doesn't have that Libran energy to balance, literally balance it. But Aries Virgo axis can be very much more like mission oriented as well and driven. But anyway, that's a completely different topic for another time. So I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of the timeline. So when we talk about timelines and stuff, it might be just good to be able to visualize exactly what was happening when it comes to astrology. So, around 1700 BC, the Babylonians, it's like the first recorded astrological analysis. They had 18 signs. There's also a lot of information in that time with 17 signs. And as time continues, the Babylonians switched to 12 signs, which is also basically congruent to the Greeks that were using the 12 signs around 400 BC. So we see this evolution sort of moving to the 12 zodiac signs that are mainstream today. Between 200 and 100, we have Hipparchus started publishing a bunch of data about astrological mathematics. So this is when geometry, Babylonian was a lot more arithmetic, whereas the Greeks were more geometric. And Hipparchus started basically taking both into consideration and creating an algorithm, something that would be repeating. So Ptolemy, who's the creator of the tropical algorithm as we know it today, was using basically Hipparchus's information and then created the tropical algorithm. So Hipparchus was using this data to calculate the precession of the equinox. So it's interesting that Ptolemy basically kind of, I don't want to say stole Hipparchus's information, but a lot of the criticism that he got at the time was like, your work is basically just quoting Hipparchus with like a little bit of a difference. But to calculate the equinoxes and the eclipses. So Ptolemy was, read a lot of Hipparchus's information and then published his, which is the tropical algorithm that we know today. And that was around like year 150, or between 150 and 120 BC. And then that algorithm, the tropical algorithm, works for quite some time. And during the time that Ptolemy was doing this, fate was like such an important thing. Like discovering one's fate and predicting the future and things like that were just really, really important. And so that's why they wanted some sort of repeating algorithm. And so this algorithm, tropical algorithm, at this point, 0, which again, there is no such year as 0. This would actually be 1 BC to 1 AD. This is the split where sidereal and the tropical algorithm no longer align. So this would be the time where the tropical algorithm would say that 0 degrees Aries is the equinoxial point. That begins to no longer be true as we move. So as we move through the AD, we have the Julian calendar that started. That's the calendar system that took on Ptolemy's mathematics.
And that system has some real issues, by the way, like skipping weeks and months at a time.
Yes.
To catch up with the discrepancies. And crazy stuff.
Absolutely. That's another thing just about the sort of change in the calendar models is that when these, quote unquote rulers decided to enforce their calendar method, they deleted years, months. And I've seen some people online, like in text posts on Twitter and stuff, be like, yo, what was happening at this time? And it shows like their calendar on their phone jumping from like the year like 1582 to like 1477. Don't quote me on those numbers specifically, but it just like even our phones are showing the timeline manipulation. So we have the Julian calendar, which exactly as Janine said, riddled with problems or timeline issues. And that's another thing about the tropical algorithm. It really can be considered kind of harmless. Like who cares if you don't use astrology to better your life or whatever, who really cares if you're using it correctly or not. But it's a timeline issue, not necessarily an astrology issue in a lot of ways. Because again, it's a timekeeping mechanism, but I guess that's another story. But backtracking a little bit, during this time from 200 to 100, this is also the time that the first computer was created, called the Antikythera. I highly recommend like Googling it for anyone who's watching. It is, again, it's the first computer because it was a mechanical model that was calculating the equinoxes and the eclipses, and it was using the math that Hipparchus and Ptolemy were using. So again, it sort of reinforces this mathematical repetition model. And we also have sort of the first maybe artificial intelligence, an intelligent, item, at least in our recorded timeline, right? Of the historic timeline that is given to the public. Anyway, so yeah, we have the Julian calendar, then time progresses. And, we have the Dark Ages. During the Dark Ages, there is a monk named Dionysius Exiguus. He creates the BC AD system for the Catholic Church. And so, before this time, this BC AD 0, this wouldn't actually be considered 100 BC. It would be considered a different time. So again, when it comes to timeline manipulation, year 2023, everyone's thinking, oh yeah, humanity's only been around for X amount of generations, where really it's thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So when this BC AD system was created, it was utilized because the Catholic Church was trying to find an algorithm that calculated the equinoxes and eclipses so that they could plan their rituals. Like, for example, Easter. So Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. So in order for the Catholic Church to plan the rituals, they wanted some sort of repeating model. And so that is how the BC AD system coincided with the tropical algorithm. So we have the Dark Ages that continue. And again, Ptolemy's model of thinking and usage was really sort of the mainstream until we get to Copernicus. So another thing that's important to mention for Hipparchus and Ptolemy, they were both living under the assumption that everything evolved around the Earth. It wasn't until Copernicus, published his data, which of course during the Dark Ages, you would have been slain if you would mention anything about the Earth revolving around the sun. But that's what Copernicus published, that the celestial bodies revolve around the sun.
I think we need to take a minute and just let that sink in.
Yeah.
All this up till 1543, is that correct, was calculated around an Earth geocentric model.
Yes.
Everything revolves. Holy wow, y'all.
Yeah. So the tropical algorithm is under the assumption that everything evolves around the Earth. And, when we calculate charts, we do use a geocentric model, which is, everything revolves around the Earth.
It's from our point of view, though.
Yes,
yeah,
because we're the data point on Earth.
Right. And that is different.
Calculating.
That is different than saying everything revolves around the Earth.
Yes. A geocentric chart is different than a geocentric view of the solar system.
Right.
So this whole time is a geocentric view of the solar system until we hit Copernicus, who uses the heliocentric model. shortly after, we have Pope Gregory the 13th, who instilled the Gregorian calendar, and this is the calendar system that we still use today. And the Gregorian calendar manipulated the tropical algorithm a little bit. And again, this is for the church to calculate times for their rituals that they are doing. And the Gregorian calendar is the tropical timeline siphon that we have currently. So again, anytime that you're saying, oh, it's, we're in the year 2023, you are inadvertently giving timeline energy to the Gregorian calendar system, which is
You're feeding a timeline at quote unquote 0 BC.
Yes. Yeah. You're feeding this system that this monk created and that Pope Gregory the 13th most recently changed the math of.
Yeah. So it's just holding back. It's like holding evolution literally in a holding pattern at the energies of 2,000 years ago. And when we talk about in episode 2, when we talk about quote unquote Lionsgate, which is not Lionsgate, it will start to make more sense why they want to keep it there, because there is a power siphon going on. And for it to work for them, it has to be through that gateway, like the heliacal rising of Sirius. The ritual has to be the sun is in Leo, because that's where the hijack of the sovereignty comes in.
Exactly.
Sun's no longer in Leo when that happens, but they're hanging on for dear life to that time window.
And because
no, go ahead. That was the end of the thought.
I was going to say, because the sun, rules Leo. So again, it's this false light system. And all related.
And Leo holds that right to rule energy. And that's what they're manipulating instead of personal sovereignty. They're holding on to, we claim ownership of you, basically, on a planetary scale. Yeah, that's what's scary, is when you get into the metaphysics of it. You're like, oh dang, these fuckers in the church, they know what they're doing.
Exactly. And it's a spiritual global level. And most people don't even think of it or really care, but it's, think about every single child writing the date in school, every single email that you're sending. This is all a timeline siphon. It's giving energy, numeric energy to timekeeping energy. This is how we measure present moments. The I am presence is through this timeline siphon of the Gregorian calendar.
Yep. So go get your sky app, people.
Yeah. Some could say we're still in the dark ages a little bit.
Yeah. We're coming out of it. We're coming out of it.
Yeah. I would say like the age of Pisces is kind of the dark ages.
Yeah.
It's very, very watery and sort of hidden and things.
Yeah, and they're trying to anchor the low vibe octave. Like, we're 700 years out from the true age of Aquarius, and they're really trying to anchor those inorganic timeline. We'll just leave it at inorganic, right?
Right, distorted Aquarian.
The technology base that is controlling humanity, and it's like, it's just going to fall apart. I just don't see how it's going to hold up, but yeah. It's just too obvious at this point, but they're hanging on, they're hanging on by their nails, and they're working it every which way they can. So I think the biggest shift is just be in tune with nature. I mean, for people that aren't into astrology, that's fine. It's just a modality to help see the truth. That's it.
Yeah. And people who aren't into astrology, even better. Just look at the sky. It doesn't even have to be astrology. Just like use the astronomy, and you don't have to like astrology to be like, hey, the moon is right next to the constellation Leo.
It's literally that obvious. But this helps you to see where the rest of the hijacks are with like BC, AD, timelines, things like that, numerology. Like, you start piecing a bigger puzzle together. It's all connected. That's the thing. It's like, it's all entangled and connected, and you can. Astrology is just a really handy thread where you can pull the sweater apart really fast.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I don't necessarily see Pisces as like darkness that way, because it's water, because I know that on some level, like, our primordial existence came from the waters. And I feel like Pisces has to do with return to source. And I feel like that is a part of the reason why we're being distracted from it.
Agreed. There's
Absolutely.
octaves.
Mhm.
Every sign has octaves of energy.
Yeah.
I feel like the
Right.
low vibe is kind of that it's oblivion or it's the
Escapism.
highest spiritual realms. It's just
Yeah.
where are you shaking out in between? Yeah, escapism. That could
Yeah.
be it. That's a good word for it.
Mhm. Everything has the light and the shadow. And the shadows of Pisces are exactly what you said: escapism, delusion, illusion, addiction.
Psychosis.
Yeah, psychosis,
Yeah.
literally. Yeah, dissociation, possession,
Yeah.
things like that. Whereas the light aspect is spiritual alignment, spiritual embodiment, the I am presence, source, you know, astral travel, out of body experiences on the higher level, right? You can do it sort of the cheap and dirty way or a terrifying way. That would be more of the shadow. But if you can astral travel, dream recall, lucid dream, those are all very high vibrational aspects of Pisces.
Yeah.
High locate, all that.
It is the waters, though. You're right, Georgia. It's the psychic waters, right? The primordial psychic waters of everythingness.
Creation.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I would even say that, you know, when you look at tropical astrology, almost across the board, the way they describe each sign is almost the lowest vibe version of every sign.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a part of the decode too. There's an integration, like, and then we have to like get out of it. Like, you know, Libra, for instance, we always say, oh, Libra's so indecisive. Libra doesn't know. Libra's literally the scales. Nothing decides more than the scales. It has the final
Exactly.
decision.
Yeah.
So there has to be a
girl.
kind of shift in how we see things.
Mhm.
Talking to a Libra sun, Libra ascend, and I can tell you that is 1,000% true.
Mhm.
Both of y'all are
Absolutely.
Libras.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and I would say I'm not indecisive. If anything,
Yeah.
I'm extremely direct. And
Same.
I really don't have a lot of fixed placements in my chart anymore. In my tropical chart, I definitely did. But yeah, I still feel very direct and decision oriented. I don't really ponder on making decisions or anything like that.
Mhm.
But again, that's that aspect of like the low vibe versus high vibe analysis of it. And, you know, it may even take a certain consciousness level to even be open to the true sky of seeing it for yourself. And, you know, I made this comment a while ago that it seems like the true sky is sort of spiritually gatekeeping itself. You know, some people just, even if they see it, they look at
I
the
love
sky for
that.
themselves. They're like, I don't care, or no, that doesn't make sense, or I still think this. It's like, you know, it's really baffling, the amount of denial and again delusion, illusion that a lot of
Yeah.
people are under. Not that
Well,
it
I
makes them a
can
bad
tell you
person or anything
it
like
took me
that.
a good solid month to sit down with the archetype when I was like, I'm not a Scorpio,
Mhm.
because it does weave into your personality. Like you're just like, okay, this is what it says. This is what I am. Okay, let's look at. But I tell you what helped me get out of that was, okay, Scorpio's a water sign. Libra is an air sign. And I am completely like in that mental realm. I'm very logical. I'm very focused in that way. And I'm like, once I got to the elemental nature of the sign, I was like, there it is. There's no denying it. It's right there.
Yeah, I totally went through the same thing. I mean, thinking I was a Scorpio my whole life was a very dark journey. I would say there was a lot of pain programs, a lot of, you know, just the traditional low vibrational Scorpio stuff that you'll see in the memes. And it just coincides exactly with what Georgia's saying of, you know, people who follow the tropical algorithm. It's an echo chamber of making fun of the worst, you know, habits or, you know, characteristics of each sign. Oh, all, you know, Geminis are two-faced, all Cancers are crybabies, and things like that. It's just so surface level. And it, again, it does not have room for evolution. There's really not a lot of soul growth. And I really haven't found any tropical accounts that I find inspiring in that way. That help people to do that. If anything, it just sort of mimics these like trauma things. But after I got my true sidereal chart, or my real sky chart, I should say, my Mercury is in Scorpio. So, reading Mercury as sort of daily life, even apart from communication, it's like, okay, yeah, my lower self got stuck in thinking that my daily self was a Scorpio, but really it's the way that I communicate. So I've noticed that in a lot of clientele that have made the switch, is that they're like, a lot of the placements that I had in tropical, it's just different. So it's like helping me piece together parts of myself, like in a way that makes more sense. Like I never really felt like I was a Cancer sun. I definitely feel more Gemini, but my Mercury's in Cancer, and that makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. So it's just a level higher, and but a lot of people don't have like a huge shift, right? It's like everything changes 24 degrees, and sometimes that can be the same sign because Virgo's so big, Pisces too. But sometimes it,
Yeah, that's what I tell people too. Go ahead, Georgia.
Because the planets travel closely together, then you can see those kind of overlaps. Like I thought that I was a 29 degrees Gemini with a Mercury in Cancer. And as it turned out, I was a 0, almost 1 degrees Gemini with a Cancer rising. So you can kind of start to see how, because they're still close enough, and the inner planets travel closely, like there can be those kinds of connections.
Yeah, like a slight shift. It's just a planet in a different spot. That's what I tell people all the time. I'm like, if you're feeling the energy of, say, Gemini, then you probably do have something parked in Gemini. It's just not what you think it is. It's just not your sun sign, or, whatever, but it's coming through. Like your sun sign is your expression energy, your soul expression. And maybe like Sashi said, it's like your Mercury is coming through there, and that has a different vibe.
So for me, I'm a Gemini in every system, a Gemini sun in every system.
I love that.
So
yeah, I love that.
No matter, and it's the only day that you can be a Gemini in every system. So
it's like Georgia was coming in as a Gemini, hell or high water. It was happening. You're making sure you got the message.
But I can say, although I present quite femininely because of my Cancer rising, I have a very integrated masculine side. And I definitely feel the twins within. So that for me has stayed steadfast.
Yes. Very dialed in clairvoyance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm Gemini ascendant. So my ascension journey has absolutely been, balancing my own masculine and feminine energy within, and the twin journey. Absolutely. It's ascended me like none other.
Yes. So time check, we have 12 minutes before the 90-minute mark, which it seems like we're going to go over.
We should talk about our logo a little bit before we wrap up.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because that can lead us into, let's see, the next thing. Hang on, let me figure out where I put this. I think I have to open the image. Okay. Screen share. All right, you guys carry on. I'll figure out how to get this to come up.
Okay. Yeah, so, as we were talking about, people who may identify with a sign and sort of wanting to let go, or, being hesitant to let go of a chart because they, associate themselves with a sign, just check out the Real Sky, get a Sky app, look at the day and the minute that you were born and see how it feels. You don't have to adhere to it, but at least you'll have the data to sort of make that decision for yourself.
Yeah. So we kind of all got started talking because we were all interested in what is going on with the sign of Cancer. So I always loved the moon. I was kind of a moon worshiper in a way. And when I came to realize that the moon wasn't exactly what we thought it was, I started to have to really dissect the sign of Cancer. For me, it was, how can an inorganic celestial body rule a sign. So I started to dive into that. And then that just opened up the whole conversation of what symbolizes the sign of Cancer and what the sign of Cancer is really about. And then I started to notice that Sachi was talking a little bit about it too. And then I started talking to Janine. And so that was kind of how the three of us started having these conversations. What's going on with the sign of Cancer?
And it's very relevant for you guys because of the Vedic astrology and nakshatras. It's like, I didn't have that sort of background, but I did come to the same conclusion. It's like, it's moon and sun are considered luminaries, but moon is a dead light luminary. It doesn't emit light. Science will say it does, like, emit a fraction of a bit of light, but it's mostly reflected light from the sun. And that is the interesting nugget of that archetype for me personally.
And so we look at the sun and the moon, we've seen it oftentimes as father and mother, but really there's a lot of mother distortions there because the earth is the mother. You know, what does the earth do with the sunlight? It makes everything grow and prosper. It becomes impregnated by that light and everything lives in that light on the earth, not the moon. So that was just like, okay, well, that's right in front of our faces.
So true. Yeah. So the pickle of the moon.
Yeah.
So in Persian astrology, they actually said that the moon could rule no sign because the moon moves too quickly to rule a sign. And that Cancer was actually ruled by the sun, and that Leo is the sun during the day and Cancer is the sun at night because it's still the sun even though it's night, which is why the Cancer has an affinity towards the moon, which I actually thought was quite interesting and made actually a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, agreed. And when you think like all the emanations of the animal that Cancer has been there, I feel like there's definitely been some more aligned, like better aligned animal symbols for Cancer, but the crab just has a lot of tough connotations. But it's that archetype of like, there's a hard outer shell, AKA the moon, and what's inside is soft and tender, right? It's also been what the archetype of a turtle. I think
So
some mythologies use a beetle, a lobster.
Yep,
Yeah,
beetle.
it's been a lobster. A lot of
I like the
crustaceans
archetype of the turtle quite a lot, and that's the one that I can find that goes the farthest back. And I like it because there's a lot of cultures that talk about the turtle being of the creational energy of mother, grandmother turtle. And it's connected with both ocean and the earth. And it still speaks to its connection with the moon because of its 13 segments on the back, kind of speaking to the moon as well. I feel like the others are kind of a downgrade. I mean, for me personally, but I know that there's many ways that we can look at it. But for me,
agreed.
I feel like turtle is most.
I feel like the other ones are more reflecting the hijack,
yes.
the low octave of that energy. And you get into a lot of conversations or thought processes about, okay, you have to just be like, okay, what is the moon? Right? How did it get here? It causes eclipses, you know, between the sun and the moon causes eclipses on our planet. There's a lot of stuff that influences our water and our psyche, because water, the element of water, is connected to our emotional bodies and our psyche, and it pulls on that really hard. So I mean, I was actually researching stuff on like destruction of the planet Maldak in our solar system, which is now the asteroid belt, and I had some major aha moments about the moon. I was like, well, you just got to zoom out to this really big picture scenario and go, okay, well, what is the moon doing? It's acting like an energetic wall. Think about how fast it goes around versus the other planets, how fast it goes around the Earth. Every 28 days, right? Like it's making a cycle. That's fast. That's affecting our emotional bodies. It causes the tides. So it's acting as a wall, but it's also, because this is tied to the destruction in the solar system, it's acting as a shield. Like literally when they talk about the cosmic egg, like something contained within, that's energetically in a time duration. You got to think of this in the fourth dimension, what the energy of the moon is doing as it's orbiting around the planet. So it acts as a wall. It acts as like a psychic blockade. It acts as a lot of really interesting things, but it also acts as a counterweight. It's counterbalancing, it's both a reflection of and acting as a protection mechanism to the distortions of the harmonics in the solar system. It's partially an attempt to rebalance the harmonics. It's partially keeping us locked in, like the soul, quote unquote, soul trap. But when you understand the soul decimation that happened from the destruction of the planet in our solar system, you realize kind of like it's almost like a necessary evil. Like I kind of don't judge it anymore, but it does hold a lot of distortion that is connected to Saturn. So there's this whole matriculation process of soul matrix that it's like Earth is kind of doing double duty for Earth and the souls that incarnated on Earth, but also helping these souls that were decimated on this other planet matriculate through the Earth matrix, reassemble all the soul fragments so they can get out. So it's kind of like, it is like that cosmic egg situation. And I do feel like the turtle is kind of the kindest archetype until we came along.
Yeah. Well, turtle's definitely like the divine timekeeper of it. As Georgia said, like every single turtle will have 13 pieces or segments on its shell. So it has that wisdom, inherent to it. I will say lobster and crab, probably the most delicious portrayals of Cancer, but that might even feed into the mother feminine
eating the mother
of Cancer, of eating, and this sort of notion that the mother should be consumed, just sort of like consistently giving without boundary, to the point where they're giving themselves and their own flesh sort of thing. And that can tie into the Saturn moon matrix, considering, Saturn has been known to eat his own children. So there definitely could be something there. And we obviously will go deeper into it for our Cancer or our Cancerian, our turtle episode.
Yeah. So we decided just to recode the archetype because, what's in that, inside that hard shell is the golden pearl. It's literally the solar feminine. Exactly. That's the true archetype. All those words that we talked about, the true archetype is solar feminine, and it's in a protective shell because it's wounded. It's in this solar system that seems to be the situation at this time. So the reemergence of like the true divine solar feminine is a counterbalance to the Leo energy, the sun energy, that the sun holds that archetype at Leo. We're just going to call it something both strong and protected, and the beauty is on the inside and it's evident. The golden pearl, there it is.
There it is. And you're not going to eat a pearl. Well, I
You're
guess you
not
could
gonna
have
eat
pearl
a pearl.
pearl powder, but yeah. You would adorn it, right? You would cherish it.
It is a beautiful,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful organic jewel, right? It's a natural, beautiful thing. And like, girls, I don't know about y'all, but some of these astral travels I've had with like activations, like you literally receive pearls, you receive dragon pearls, like activations. And it's a very important symbol. So I feel like recoding that archetype is a really powerful moment in the timeline where the divine feminine, the solar feminine, claims its power. So that's what we're doing.
Totally agreed. And yes, I have had those cosmic pearl journeys, and they're always they feel like a homecoming when they happen.
Yeah. Pearls.
So this is a part. Yeah. So this is what we're doing. we're bringing ourselves back to our own homecoming through this recoding of the Divine Mother.
And I mean, you can go into the nth degree of the archetypes, like how is a pearl made? There's usually a piece of sand, which is quartz, which acts as an irritant. Quartz, we all know, is a very powerful crystal, but it, you know, the natural capability of the organic matrix to turn something that can be irritating into something beautiful is just a testament to the divine feminine. So
Yeah,
and it's
like
such a third dimensional thing, right? Like,
yeah, totally.
Like a diamond or like a pearl, like how we have to integrate that toughness, that hardness, that irritation to come up with the thing that's the most beautiful.
Yeah, it's like it is a skill set, like to both be strong and protected and beautiful and still soft on the inside, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's our story, and we're sticking to it.
Yeah, and we're, you know, we've talked about recoding the sign of Cancer. We've also talked about renaming it. That's originally how we got into this discussion was, hey, why are we calling Cancer when it has been completely hijacked and bastardized by the medical community to mean something so sickening and terrible? It's like nobody wants cancer. And even me as a Cancer moon, you know, I hate saying like I have a Cancer placement. It's just the energetics and the sound mechanism of saying that is sort of putting a spelling on yourself, sort of summoning Cancer energy.
Yeah, the dissonance it causes in your psyche and your body it's disturbing. It really is. And if you look at the etymology of the word cancer, literally it goes back to like canker, like mouth sores, like open festering sores. It's like, is that really the most appropriate? I mean, it does talk about the woundedness that the solar system has experienced. I understand that. But still, let's, you know, we can just recode that.
We are hammering that one out still. So we will definitely get back to everyone with what we come up with on the appropriate name for this sign that we call Cancer.
Yes. Anybody who has suggestions, drop the
please
comments
feel free
in the comment bar.
Yes. Because we want to recode it as a community. Absolutely.
Yes. Because we're all the True Sky crew.
Yes,
and that was actually what, when we first started talking, that was something important to us. And thank you for saying that, Sachi. Like, we really wanted to come together as a community to bring this forward, because it's not just about one of us or all three of us. It's about all of us.
Yeah, nobody wants cancer.
No one wants cancer.
You know, nobody wants this, especially considering, you know, how cancer is also an implant in, you know, the quote unquote matrix and how energy is siphoned through that. And even how that ties into motherhood and the emotional body as like cancer as a manifestation of something like an emotional or energetic imbalance in the body, which can be tied to the over abuse of the mother in society.
Agreed. Ooh, we've got some comments. Let's see.
Do some questions and comments.
It's hard to listen or read anyone who spews tropical anymore. It is. Like, girl, I've unfollowed a lot of people that it will just be some little nugget. There was some big name person that I will not mention names on Instagram that did a whole spiel on why tropical was the thing and everything else was dumb. And I was like, goodbye.
Yeah.
I don't have time for that. I don't need your stuff in my feed anymore. Thank you very much.
It's like, don't pull me to a lower timeline.
Yeah.
Lies.
And then you can see how eloquently and how sneakily it can just be, you know, she had so many things that I think a lot of people really bought. But it really is as simple as look up.
See for yourself.
See for yourself.
And if you can't reconcile that, you are in complete cognitive dissonance, and you probably need some help.
Yeah, you need some spiritual
but
mentorship, alignment. you know, go on your own soul journey.
Exactly. Decompress from society, go live in the forest for a while, get in tune with nature, and then we'll talk.
It's like, why is it easier to believe something just because everybody else is saying it's true versus what you actually are experiencing and seeing for yourself?
Right. I mean, and this is how we connect with our divinity. I mean, like, think of the heavens. It's the head.
Exactly.
It's the way that we stream in light through our bodies. So when we're in attunement with that, we have the ability to completely integrate our full beings. It's just like,
agreed.
And it kind of happens just like that.
Agreed. I feel like when you get this chart in front of you, it is literally your roadmap to bringing all parts of yourself back to yourself and becoming fully embodied. And everybody can do it in one lifetime. Everybody can do it. The map is right there.
Yeah.
It's just, you got to be able to read the map.
Concurred.
And then when you are able to read the true map, then you also start to be able to connect with the parts of yourself that are beyond the map.
Yeah. And then it gets fun.
Yeah.
Good times. You guys, this was great. How do you feel about where we're at? Feel like that's a good place to pause for the day?
I think this was a great first episode, and I think this was a beautiful place to end.
Yes,
I think so too. And we're wrapping it up. It's 1:07. We're going to complete our chat at 1:08.
Yes. And thank you everyone who tuned in to the live. Thank you everyone who is watching the playback, and we would love to hear your feedback. Anyone who's watching the playback as well. Should we talk a little bit about kind of what we want to do in the future and what they can expect?
Yeah, let's talk about the format really quick. We're going to do bi-monthly. So every 2 weeks, we're going to do an episode. And the second episode in a month, like, we will do a transit session for the upcoming month. So the next session, we're going to do transits. That will be in 2 weeks. And we're also going to talk about Lionsgate bullshit because it needs to go. So that's kind of the format. Is there something else that you wanted to mention or you were thinking about?
No, I just think, yeah, that's good. We're going to do some transit reports, and then we'll also have some episodes on other topics that we're excited to share with you and delve super deep into not just the signs, but actually the individual stars, which Georgia and Janine are absolutely incredible. I'm learning so much from them about these individual stars. It's very cool, and I guarantee it's the most detailed information you will find about astrology, astronomy, and the true sky and your true self.
Yes, and we're going to do it by season. So the first season is really, we're going to go through each constellation with all the mythologies. We will do a season on fixed stars. We'll do a season on houses. And it will alternate between an episode on a topic like Aries or Cetus, and a transit session in a month. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. Next session's gonna be fire.
So come see us again in 2 weeks. Same place, live on YouTube.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Yeah, and you can find us on Instagram. I am at Inner Sky Alchemy. Georgia
at Star Nectar Astrology,
and Sashi
at Sashi the Scorpio.
Yay, we look forward to seeing you guys next time.
And you can find all three of us at the True Sky Crew.
At the True Sky Crew, that's right. If you're here, you know that.
All right, True Sky Crew.
Share.
Thank
you guys.
Yes, share, comment, like, subscribe.